Hi guys, Elle here. So this is a video that I've been talking about making for friggin' ever. I started writing it up and even filming parts of it before, and I think I was coming at it from kind of the wrong place. I was coming at presenting this idea to you guys from kind of a defensive place, like I was gonna have to argue why I associated each rune with each tarot card, and just go on and on and on. I had like a defense written for each and every one, and I scrapped that. Because that's a fucking stupid video. Like, who wants to listen to that? I could make 22 or 24 videos talking about why I personally correspond this particular rune with this particular tarot card, and where they meet, and why they meet that way. And I'll give you guys, you know, a little bit of why I've associated it that way. But it's fascinating to me, this whole world out there of like arguments about how one system does not equal another system. 22 does not equal 24. 22 Major Arcana, 24 Elder Futhark runes. They're different systems. They come from different parts of the world. You know, why try and make it fit? My answer to that is, why the fuck not? Yeah, they're two different systems, but when you get right down to it, if you can see that they are fundamentally talking about the same thing, then why not? Let's try to make those connections. I think, you know, I guess here's an example. Why associate Hebrew letters with the tarot cards? You know, why? What happens when you do that is you deepen your understanding of both systems, you know, of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and the Major Arcana. And I think that, you know, Eliphas Levi was the first person to make that association, or to write it down anyway. And I think this is probably what was going through his head. He's like, there's a similar amount of this, a similar amount of this, in that case the same amount. But when you look, you really realize that they are talking about the same stuff. And the runes and tarot are the two big systems that I work with, but you could do this with so many different things, with every alphabet, basically. And I do look at the tarot as a symbolic pictorial alphabet. But when you look at all these ancient alphabets, like the Greek, especially Greek and Hebrew, but also Sanskrit and Latin, they all have similar amounts of letters, and they have a common source. You know, all these alphabets, when it comes right down to it, are doing just what the tarot is doing. We talked about in Living the Tarot how it is it's a map. It's human evolution, and every letter represents a different path, a different idea, a different energy. Anyway, people get so frustrated trying to do this, and I think a lot of the feedback that they get when they, you know, hop online and sort of ask for help is, why the fuck are you bothering to do that shit anyway? They don't make any sense. But I think the exercise in and of itself of finding correspondences, that's why I think the whole witchy pagan community is so obsessed with correspondences in general, because it deepens our understanding. You learn more about whatever you're trying to correspond. And it's not about making things fit so that they look good, or so that they sound good. It's about understanding these concepts. And if you have to make them fit like a puzzle piece, you know, if you try to jam it in there, you know, you're learning something by trying to jam it in there. You're realizing it doesn't fucking fit. You take it away and you start over. That's sort of what this whole process has been like for me. But it's been enlightening. I've loved every second of it. It's been my fun little research side project for many years. Anyway, I guess what we should talk about here is alphabets in general, and why they have, or what they are really. They're esoteric, you know, the esoteric side of alphabets. I'm I'm going to use this book to help me sort of illustrate these concepts. This book is Magical Alphabets by Nigel Pennick. It's a wonderful book. It came out back in '92, I think, and it doesn't do what I'm about to give you. It doesn't make correspondences and say Aleph equals alpha and all that kind of stuff. What it does do is talk about the significance of what is being expressed by each different alphabet that he does go over. He goes over the Hebrew alphabet, he goes over the Greek alphabet, he goes over the runes and Celtic Ogham, is that how you say it? The Bardic alphabet, if you will. I think this is the only book on Ogham that I actually have. I don't really know too much about it. But it's another one. You can clearly see when you look at it that it is referring to something greater. So basically he starts out the book just talking about why alphabets are relevant to esoteric study. And he says, I'm paraphrasing, alphabets are, how we understand the world. All ancient alphabets, the Greek, the Hebrew, all of them, are metaphorical, just like language is metaphorical in and of itself. You use language or language represents objects and concepts, but they're not actually the objects and the concepts themselves. So therefore, letters in an alphabet are metaphors of reality also. This is that as above, so below. What you see around you is a reflection of what is above, the macrocosm, the microcosm. I'm going to read a little bit here. He says, talking about alphabets, in their esoteric aspects, they can convey meaning that cannot be expressed adequately by any other means. These are symbols that can express non-verbal experiences that can alter one's consciousness drastically. Suddenly, they can change the direction of the flow of one's mind, diverting it to new and unexpected channels. Users of magical alphabets may experience a flood of new understanding, accompanied by an immediate recognition of completely new viewpoints of life. On a more general level, magical alphabets represent the presence of the infinite within the finite. I think anyone who's ever spent any time studying, especially something like Hebrew, which is so interconnected with the tarot, right? You see how their entire worldview can be expressed through their alphabet, basically. And I think we read about Pythagoras, and other people talk about how the Greek alphabet does the same thing. In the Eastern, you have the Sanskrit and Latin and so on and so on. So I think it makes perfect sense to figure out, what corresponds to what in the system that, in two systems maybe that you love and that you study and that you use. So I think things get sort of interesting trying to do the rune tarot thing, because they're not just alphabets. They're two complete divinatory systems in and of themselves. So just like when you're reading with the tarot, the same thing happens when you're reading the runes, right? There's meanings to the cards that exist on so many different levels. It can be telling you this big spiritual message, like we talked about in Living the Tarot. I will get to part 3 very soon, I swear. This initiatory journey, the spiritual evolution. And they can also have these very more mundane meanings. You ask the tarot or you ask the runes about your love life, and it's going to give you more practical information. So I think that the problem that I see with in other books and on websites and other people's biker gang outside today and other people's correspondences is that they're not sort of pulling meaning from the same level to make those connections. If you just went off the name of the rune and the name of the tarot card, you're not really going to get to the heart of the meaning there. And the same goes if you just went off of, some of the more divinatory meanings. These two systems originated from very different parts of the world, and I think that when it comes to how the energies, the big energies maybe that they're sort of talking about, have trickled down into the daily lives and manifested their energies, the way that each culture culturally has looked at that, that's where you find so many differing branches. And I think if you try to connect them that way, they don't really make sense either. You can look at like Uruz, right? The Uruz were in the second rune. and it's got all these associations with oxen and with strength. So you might jump to a conclusion and be like, all right, that's the strength card. But then you go and you study both the Uruz rune and the strength card. And you're like, these aren't really fitting. They might fit on the surface. But they're not really connecting on any sort of deeper spiritual, esoteric sort of a level. So that's what I set out to do. If you look this stuff up online, you'll find myriads of different associations that people have made, and if you do agree with ones that you found, that's fantastic. But I think that in this case, it's not the destination that is important. It's the journey. It's studying both systems and comparing and contrasting. It just deepened my understanding of both, and I cannot recommend this kind of work highly enough. It's great. So I have one more kind of cool thing that I want to share with you guys. This has always fascinated me. I'm going to show you an image from a book called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. Where he talks about how, the sacred geometry symbol, the flower of life, is sort of found in different cultures all over the world because it's such a universally powerful and expressive image, and truthful image, I guess you could say. But anyway, he's talking about how the symbol of the tree of life, like the Kabbalah tree of life, fits perfectly into, or that shape and that image comes out of the flower of life, or out of the seed of life. And he talks about how, obviously this is a Kabbalah symbol, right? That's what we associate it with. But he talks about how the same symbol, slightly changed, and I'll show you how, is found on these pillars in ancient Egypt, these 5,000-year-old pillars. Now, I'm not sure if it's, the symbols on the pillars are literally as old as the pillars themselves. Who's to say? But I think it's fascinating that they are there. Anyway, what it is, let me show you. I sort of wrote all over it. This is my book. Can you guys see that? You see that flower of life with the tree of life imposed over it? So this symbol up here is the classic tree of life, and that is superimposed over the seed of life. So for it to fit perfectly over the flower of life image, I'm not going to get into the sacred geometry of all this. We'll do that at another point. But for that tree of life to fit perfectly over the classic flower of life, which is that size and that many repeating circles and so on and so forth for a very specific reason. But for it to fit there, what you have to do is add one more pathway and one more circle at each end. And that symbol, the one over the flower of life there, backwards, the one there, is the one that was found on these ancient Egyptian pillars with these 2 extra pathways added. Basically 2 extra sephira added, but what really concerns me is the 2 extra pathways, because then you go from 22 pathways to 24 pathways. Just all I thought when I saw that, and he doesn't really talk about that in the book, that it fits the runes, that it creates 24 pathways or anything, but that was my first thought. I was like, holy shit, the runes fit on those paths. So yeah, I think it's fascinating that there's 22 and that there's 22 Hebrew letters, and that all works, and it works perfectly. But 24 letters is not insane, it still works. Now, I've seen people associate, basically what they end up doing is they take their tarot cards, and 2 tarot cards will get 2 runes. Which is a perfectly valid way to do it, I guess. If you think that those energies correspond to that tarot card or that rune, then hey, it works. What I ended up doing, how I've sort of worked that out, because I tried it that way. I tried it other ways. I thought maybe there were 2 extra runes that just didn't have a correspondency. So the answer I eventually came to, and how I resolved this for myself, was again, this is after years. I just jumped to this conclusion. But basically, there's 2 runes. There's Teiwaz and there's Berkana. that fundamentally, for me anyway, represents, you know, the great male aspect and this great feminine or female aspect. You have the Sky Father in Teiwaz, and you have the Earth Mother in Berkana. I know some people associate Ingwaz with, you know, the Earth Father, Green Man, and all that kind of stuff. But this way of doing it is how I view the runes. So he's, yeah, Sky Father, spiritual warrior, Earth Mother. I wrote all that stuff down. And basically, they can jump around. They can fit in a couple different places in the tarot, because there isn't in the tarot these two opposites laid out exactly like how they are in the tarot. They sort of manifest in slightly different ways in the tarot. You have your magician and your high priestess. Some people might say you have your pope and your papist. I don't really love that one, but it's there. And then of course you have your empress and your emperor. So really all that's happened is those two fundamental ideas are just spread out a little bit differently in both systems. You'll see how they fit together. I am going to list my correspondences down in the description also. I'll write out the name of the tarot card and write out the name of the rune that I associate it with right next to it. But let's go through. Here's Elle's Tarot Rune Correspondences. The Magician is associated with Fehu. The first four are exactly the same. I'll tell you that right now. They follow this beautiful sequence that just works. Magician Fehu. What I'm going to do here, actually, I'm not going to go into any definitions of the tarot cards, really. This is basically a tarot channel, more or less. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that you guys are a little bit more familiar with like tarot meanings than you might be with the rune meanings. So what I'll do is just give a little bit of information about the rune and sort of a jumping off point maybe as to why I corresponded it with that card. Just a little bit to wet your whistle, but you can go and, I mean, ask me questions. I'd be happy to answer them and provide some more details. But you can totally just head down the same road I did and start looking into it. So I jotted down some notes. Bear with me. I'm going to read some stuff. Fehu. And then I wrote here for Fehu, of course, it's, first of all, I'm not jumping around so much, but how fucking fascinating is it that in so many different alphabets, the very first letter, like Aleph or Fehu, is associated with cattle. The same is true in the Greek, and the same is true in the Gothic alphabets. It's cattle, and it's a big thing in the runes. You know, this idea of mobile wealth, right? If you've ever read anything about Fehu, mobile wealth. So like, how the fuck does that correspond with the magician, right? But really, what is wealth? You have to ask yourself that question. Of course, in a divinatory reading with the runes, it can have everything to do with actual physical money and how you make a living. Inner wisdom can be your wealth. You know, these are the metaphors of the runes that happen in a reading. I already came to visit. Wealth is what you gain through living. Wealth is experience. Wealth is life. So Fehu, of course, yes, it's this vital energy. It's this primal fire. It's the Big Bang even. But it's also the ability of an individual to create and maintain wealth. It's like the magician using the four elements to create, to maintain, to create. So it really does. That fits so amazingly well. I think it's so interesting how the runes, as shamanic and primitive as they are, they really speak to these primal energies, can have so much in common and be talking about the same sort of things that this more, I wouldn't say it's more highly evolved, but it sort of is, this steeped in Western mysticism, you know, the system of the tarot and how you'll see, it's cool. Moving on, let's jump to the High Priestess, number 2. And the rune that I've corresponded here is Uruz. Like I said, the first 4 are exactly the same. Now Uruz is all about like this primal cosmic force that shapes manifestation. You know, there's this in the Futhark, you have your explosion of energy, and then Uruz is what shapes that energy into what will eventually manifest in the next rune as matter. So this one was so cool when I finally fucking figured it out. I knew Uruz was gonna fit into here somehow. Couldn't quite understand it. And it's something that we talked about about the High Priestess when we talked about the Living the Tarot again. We talked about how she represents this veil, right? Like you can't see to the other side. All you see around you is what you see is this matter, but which is an illusion. You don't see what is supporting it behind it. You know, the astral world, if you will. You could look at it like that, or even that it's just impermanent and that it's fleeting. It's illusion. Our bodies are illusion. But what Uruz is getting at, and what Uruz is the energy of that forming energy, the pattern behind or underneath all of creation and manifestation. So if you're with me so far, that's fucking awesome. And if you do feel like there's a little something most missing from those first two explanations, there is, and I'll get to that in a second. So hang tight. If you feel like this is working, but it's not really as good as I thought it was gonna fit, there's more coming. We'll come back to the Magician and the High Priestess in just a second. I'm going to go over the Empress and the Emperor real quick, and then I'll make sense of the whole thing. So the Empress is, like I said, first four. Thurisaz is the third rune associated with the Empress. Numerology plays into these correspondences a great deal. It's really interesting. But yeah, Thurisaz is this idea of projected energy. It's willpower. It's also, you're like, how's that fit with the Empress? Stay with me. It's also the idea of giants and what giants represent in Norse myth and all that is matter, basically. Sometimes chaos and things like that, in which matter fucking is pure chaos anyway, isn't it? But manifestation and physicality and matter. It also, Thurisaz has a lot to do with the god Thor as a fertility deity. I know you're like, it's a thorn and it means bad things, and it can have, I don't personally look at it that way, but it can have all those sort of divinatory meanings, yes. But it also has these meanings associated with it. Any rune book you read, you'll get to this idea of fertility and creation, which is very, very much the realm of the Empress and the number 3 even. I think Edred Thorson talks about how it's about bringing these two polar opposites or two polarities together to create the third. That's the shape of the Thurisaz rune stave, right? And it creates this third united mother, father, child. All those ideas are present in the Thurisaz rune, just like they're present in the Empress card. What's really missing, I sort of think, from that association is this feminine principle. But you could totally see how that can get lost, right, in two very different traditions. I mean, in the Norse, they have a male name for the moon and a female deity sort of representing the sun. So, you know, male and female names and all that kind of stuff doesn't really matter so much here. And then the Emperor becomes Ansuz, the Ansuz rune. And Ansuz has so much to do with order, knowledge, wisdom, reason. It's Odin's rune. Odin is consciousness, right? So, you know, Odin's rune is like the word made flesh. It's ordering this physical world. I'm sort of describing the process of creation right now too, and that's where a lot of the tarot and the runes coincide on this almost creation story level. Fascinating. Okay, so this, now we've gone through the first 4, this is where those 2 extra runes, Teiwaz and Berkana, that I was talking about before, the Sky Father, the spiritual warrior in Teiwaz, and the Earth Mother, the receptive, pregnant, creative Earth Mother, spirit and matter, and black and white opposites, all those things are sort of encompassed in Teiwaz and Berkana, night and day, and I'll stop. But they also really, I think, express that feminine and that masculine so well. So I feel like these 2 runes can be added as a set, basically, to fully get at the meaning of the tarot card of the cards of the Magician and the High Priestess. You would say Berkana can also be associated with the High Priestess in that way, and Teiwaz can be associated with the Magician in that way, to sort of get at that masculine and feminine aspects. I think they fit so much better with the Emperor and the Empress, like really fucking good. That's where I tend to have those correspondences sitting. So it's like the Empress becomes Thurisaz and Berkana, just flip-flop Berkana and Teiwaz, and Emperor becomes Ansuz and Teiwaz. So moving right along to the Hierophant, number 5, we have Kenaz. This is where we start to jump around the rune rows a little bit. It's not going to follow the perfect ordering anymore, at least not until we get to the end. Dagas and Othala sort of line up perfectly with Judgement and the world. So Kenaz is a torch. Kenaz is this guiding light, if you will. It's this internal fire. I even associate it with this like opening of the third eye. A lot of these associations I've even sort of come to because I've invoked, I've talked about this before, I've invoked these energies on the astral plane, and they manifested in very, very strange ways that just really helped me understand the energies I was dealing with so much better. And that's one of them, that opening and that knowing, and God, I wish I could have hung on to that feeling forever. It was amazing. But you could see, I guess, how this divine inspiration and this communication, this illumination of what is divine and contact with your higher self, and all those things are associated with the Hierophant. Even wisdom, illumination, teaching, some of the divinatory trickle-down meanings even overlap there. I think that works really, really well. Number 6 is a beautiful one. I've seen a lot of people make this connection with good fucking reason. It's kind of very easy to see how these 2 fit together beautifully. And that's number 6, the Lovers, with the rune Gebo. It's like that X rune. I wish I had pictures. I should have pictures printed up to show you the runes. But Gebo is all about this, for lack of a better term, union of opposites. This male and female, you could say, like a wedding. Like the Lovers is metaphorical for it too. It represents a gift also, an exchange, which can also be thought of as a sacrifice to the divine, to your divine self. It's also symbolic of weddings and partnerships, just like the Lover's card. You can see how it's getting at the same energy. And those 2 opposites that are combining, really. And this is what the essence of the Lover's card is this meeting point, this exchange of human and divine, Number 7 is the Chariot with Raidho. This is another very popular correlation that I've seen a lot of other people make. And it's a good one too. Raidho is symbolic of like a wagon, of a wheel, sound like a chariot. A lot of people jump to the conclusion actually of saying that, with good reason, I did this for a while too, Raidho being a wheel, you might want to associate that with the Wheel of Fortune. But when it comes down to it, it just doesn't quite work. There's another rune I'll show you when we get to the Wheel of Fortune that really, really fucking fits. But like I said, Raidho is the wheel, it's the wagon, it's the journey even. And it has a lot to do with, making progress on the path that you are on. Sound familiar? there. It also there's correlations with like the Chariot of Thor and all that other kind of stuff that really is just cool that it fits with a chariot. All right, moving on. Number 8, Justice. I've associated this one with Perthro. And this has been a tough one. I think people have put all sorts of really strange runes to Perthro, to Justice, excuse me. I see a lot of times the Teiwaz rune associated with Justice, and there's a lot of connections to be made there too. I think that's an interesting choice. Again, for me, it didn't quite work out that way. Perthro, I think, really, there's a real deep connection there to justice, and not just to this surface idea of justice as we, as humanity, understand justice, like some sort of human justice. That's not what the tarot is getting at when you're talking about big picture kind of stuff, you know? And we talked about it in Living the Tarot again a little bit as it relates to the path of initiation. Perthro is all about, when you see it in a book, usually they'll tell you it's like a dice cup, maybe, or a overturned cauldron. I've heard all these different things, women's legs, but it has a lot to do with divination, throwing your dice. And what you're trying to do when you, throw dice, or when you divine with the runes or with the tarot or anything like that, is, reveal things that might be hidden. It's revealing those things that are hidden or concealed and bringing them into your physical reality and recognizing them, and what's the word? Meshing them, bringing them into existence, bringing them to your knowledge, bringing them to the forefront, and dealing with them. And that's justice. Perthro, totally justice. I feel like even if you turn that rune one way or the other, you end up with the scales of balance. I guess I could mention here even, it's sort of my belief and my understanding that there are no horizontal lines in any of the runes. Probably because they would carve them on wood, and wood has grain that runs through it. So if you put a horizontal line, I remember where I first heard this theory, probably Edward Thorson or something. If you write a horizontal line, things get sort of lost and you can't see them. So there are only vertical and diagonal lines in the runes. So while the staves are incredibly representative of whether it be energy moving or an animal or a leak, or it could be all these things, the figures are still important. You have to rethink things a little bit, just because there's this lack of horizontal lines, so they're not perfectly geometric. That just keep that in mind. If you have to flip things and tweak things and move things, I don't think it's that big a deal. That's still a significant shape that has come down through the ages. So Perthro is all about this balance maintained in oneness, just like justice. All right, moving on to number 9, the Hermit. And I've associated the Hermit with Esau. Straight line, up and down. Esau is all about stasis. It's ice. It's a slow integration at times. It is a cessation of all activity. It's going within, just like the Hermit. On to number 10, we have the Wheel of Fortune. Like I was saying before, a lot of people have associated the Wheel of Fortune with Raidho, where I've associated it with Jera, my runic mudras. Jera, just so self-explanatory as far as I'm concerned. Jera is all about cycles, karma and cycles of nature, all the cycles all around, just like the Wheel of Fortune, the up and the down, the night and the day, and the myriad of ways that cycles themselves manifest. Where I think at times the Wheel of Fortune is being more specific about certain cycles. I think Jera is the energy of cyclicality itself. I don't think that's a word, but you know what I mean. And that brings us to number 11, Strength. And I have associated strength with the rune Wunjo. Wunjo is all about joy and a harmony within yourself. The imagery is very different, and the lore behind the Wunjo rune and the strength card. Excuse me, you don't see, anything really talking about conquering your animal nature specifically, but what you do see a lot, and what the strength card I think is getting at, is this idea of love, unconditional love, and joyfulness and wholeness. So yeah, I think that they work very well together. Number 12 is the Hanged Man. Another one that I feel like you can see how it fits pretty easily. If you know much about the runes, you know that Ehwaz or Eihwaz is the U tree. It's the world tree. It's the world axis. It's the tree from which Odin hangs, from which consciousness is suspended from higher worlds into lower worlds, into the world of matter. It's suspension, just like the Hanged Man. It's patience, and it's very much the sense of communication through intelligence and all those ideas. Yeah, they fit fucking beautifully. There's another one. They all fit beautifully. Should probably stop saying that. I think they all fit well. Number 13 is Death, and I have associated that with Hagalaz. I always thought it was interesting that it's known as the Mother Rune. It's the rune that looks like an H sometimes. I prefer to use the older version of that rune always. If I bought a rune set, it won't have that rune. It'll have the H representation of Hagalaz, and that's fine. But I love the Hail figure. It's like 1, 2, 3 lines intersecting, and it's called the Matrix rune, the Mother Rune. It almost holds all the shapes of all the other runes inside of it. I love how the Hebrew letter associated with it is known as the mother letter, also the letter Mem. But Hagalaz is all about transformation, just like the Death card. It even can encompass this journey into the underworld. It's so fucking good. It's the Matrix rune. It's Mother rune. It's change. It's these primal patterns also, and it all fucking works. Number 14 is Temperance, and I've associated it with Ehwaz. Ehwaz is all about harmonious duality. Even more specifically, Ehwaz can be referring to one's ability to adapt or to adjust to different situations. It literally is the Temperance card in runic form. The Ehwaz rune is even sort of known as a symbol of Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged steed. Which in itself is a combination of masculine and feminine, male and female, combined into one. 8 legs, like 2 horses. Yeah, it's a fascinating rune, and it works really well with Temperance. Moving right along to number 15, this is another association that I kind of see all over the place. This is the devil with the rune Nauthiz, that rune of constraint. It has the straight line with a cross through it. And it's all about constraint, and it's about your shadow self, a friction, that's a good word for it, a friction that leads to transformation and growth. It even has all these sort of sexual connotations, just like the devil can have associations with addiction, that need, that desire when it sort of goes too far and gets out of hand. Same, just like with the devil. Number 16, the Tower, I've associated with Ingwaz. And I remember actually the moment, this always brings this to mind for me, the first time I read Jodorowsky's book, The Way of Tarot. he has this one line in there when he's talking about not Ingwaz, when he's talking about the Tower card, and he describes it as a gestation and I'm paraphrasing, and a burst of energy, a release of energy. And my first thought was, holy fuck, that sounds exactly like the Ingwaz rune. It either looks like a diamond shape or like a DNA almost. And it's that energy and that explosion and that everything the Tower card's talking about. It doesn't so much dwell on this idea of destruction, but you can see how the two energies are really similar and probably getting at the same thing. Number 17, the star I've associated with Algiz. That's that peace sign almost. It's like the upside down peace sign. Arms up, hello. And that's even what it is. It's, reaching towards higher spiritual worlds. It is that shape of a person opening up their arms and looking up. People say the shape of the stave is associated with elk and with a flying swan. And both of those, actually, both animals are very much associated with like the Valkyries and ideas like that, ideas of your higher self and your guardian angel, all of which is associated with like the biggest keyword of the star card ever, just hope in general. This idea of contact with your higher self, being watched over, release to your what's happening to you, giving in, whatever will be, because you have hope. The idea of protection, which is a huge part of the Algiz rune, is exactly what is represented by Valkyries, that idea. Your higher self, your guardian angel, all those kind of ideas. They're protecting, a protective force. And that brings us to number 18, the moon, which I've associated with Laguz. And Laguz definitely has a lot of associations with water and cleansing and growth. It's like the dark waters of the subconscious even. And the meaning of the rune sort of runs the gamut of all the different things that water can symbolize. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't have great sources for what the runes really mean. It's all subject to interpretation. I think we've sort of boxed ourselves in because we have these few books and we just go off these few books. But really the information that we have from back then is much more in the form of those rune poems, which are really just a handy dandy way of remembering the runes and little bits of information about their bigger sort of meaning. So yeah, this correspondence with the moon card has really helped me shape how I understand the Laguz rune. This was a big one for me. I really like that. It helped me understand that it is a little bit more about the subconscious and what is hidden and integration and all those sort of ideas. Cleansing being a big one. Number 19 is the sun, of course, associated with Sowilo, the sun rune. And not just because the names sort of match each other, but Sowilo is very much, it has very, very similar meaning to the sun card, just in general, on all levels. It's about success, it's about regeneration, it's enlightenment, it's spiritual gold, it's all those things. And that brings us to number 20, Judgment, which I mentioned before is Dagaz, of course. And Dagaz is just like the sun. It's enlightenment and awakening. It's the in-between time. It's the dawn. It's that twilight. It's where the two separate become one. And Edward Thorson even calls it the rune of enlightened consciousness. Beautiful is that. And I think this idea of night into day, this rebirth, this resurrection, all those ideas are so much a part, obviously, of the Judgment card. Anyway, that brings us to number 21, the world, which I've associated with Othala. And of course, Othala is often called, you know, the rune of the homeland and ancestry. And it really does get at that idea of home, of complete and utter freedom, that being at home within yourself and one with all of the world and all of the universe. Othala is complete freedom. All right, now we have skipped a tarot card and a rune. I don't know if you noticed. I did not address the Fool first off. Place the Fool at the end here. And I've associated the Fool with the only rune left, with Manas. Now, Manas is the rune of man. It's the rune of humanity. It is the rune that represents us and this journey that we are on. It represents the ego. It's representative even of the Bifrost Bridge at times. And what the Bifrost Bridge is the bridge, the magical rainbow bridge that connects worlds, you know, so you can travel like the Fool across the rainbow bridge, from world to world, from life to life, all those metaphors. I think it's interesting. I'm gonna definitely do another video about this idea that I have. I've never seen it in books or anything, but about how the runes correspond to the chakras, really, really interesting ways. And what happens in that system, it's really very simple, but is Manas happens to fall right at the heart chakra, like right in the fucking center of what makes us human, you know, we're able to live from our heart and get out of these lower sort of animalistic chakras. And when we awaken that energy in our hearts, we are truly human. So I just thought that was interesting, but I will make another video on all that. Yeah, so that's it. That's my tarot and rune correspondences. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to hit me up. I'll see you next time. Mwah. Bye.